This is about all of us. This is about you. California may be first, but it clearly will not end here. Other states are next. Democracy is next. Democracy is under assault before our eyes. This moment we have feared has arrived.
Clashes abound this week between California Governor Gavin Newsom and U.S. President Donald Trump as tensions escalated in Los Angeles. The president deployed the National Guard to shut down protests over immigration raids. Here at home, meanwhile, Canada's top justice is issuing a stark warning. In his annual news conference this week, Supreme Court Chief Justice Richard Wagner said government attacks on the judiciary point to an autocratic government. Without naming names, Wagner said democracy is backsliding around the world, that Canadians are taking notice and fear it could happen here too. Richard Wagner is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Hi, Chief Justice Wagner. Pleasure to welcome you back to studio. Thank you for making the time.
Good afternoon. My pleasure to be here.
Your sort of annual message, you characterized it by saying it's a message of confidence in our courts. Why did you feel this moment was one that necessitated the delivery of that message?
Well, you know, this year, 2025, is our 150th anniversary at the court. So my colleagues and myself decided to visit 5 different regions in Canada and to meet the public in general, to meet the high school students, to meet the local judiciary, and to explain to them what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. And at the same time, to get their own reaction, to know more about their reality on the ground. And I think it's always a good thing to be able to inform the public about the work of the courts in general and the Supreme Court in particular.
You've also spoke about how many of them that you met with, many Canadians you met with on those stops, conveyed to you a sense of concern that what they are witnessing south of the border, insofar as sort of the fragility of some very important institutions, could bleed over here to Canada. Were you surprised at the degree to which Canadians are worried about that?
Well, I was surprised to see that the same questions were put to us, whether it be in Moncton or in Victoria. People are concerned and anxious because of what's going on outside Canada, and rightly so, I would say. And my message to them was that, yes, we should be careful. We have strong institutions in Canada, but we have to protect them. And at the same time, we have to be optimistic, because we have strong institutions, we have strong judicial system, we have our challenges in terms of funding, in terms of technology, but overall we have a good bench, we have strong and impartial judges, well-trained, probably the best trained in the world, because we export our own expertise to other judges in other countries, and judges who are governed by ethical principles, which is not the case in other countries. And the stakeholders in Canada, the major stakeholders, accept and respect the separation of powers. And that's why I think that the Canadians should be proud of their own institutions and working on that, but at the same time, never take anything for granted.
And when you mentioned protecting our institutions, as you were kind of outlining all those things about the way in which things work here, I was thinking, look, if this were 15 years ago in the United States, for example, you could have expected a similar answer. The processes, of course, are not completely analogous, but I think Americans by and large back then, and even Canadians, would have believed in the strength and the veracity of the institutions that existed there. We're in a very different scenario now, 15 years later. What lesson is there in that for us?
Well, I don't want to aim at a specific country. I will let the elected officials to deal with politics, but in terms of the rule of law, I always believed that Canada was not a superpower in terms of military or economics, but it was. Canada is a superpower in terms of the rule of law and judicial independence. And the situation outside Canada has slipped a bit, a lot, I would say, in many countries for the last couple of years, because of social media in part, because of disinformation and misinformation. And that's why it's very important to provide the public the real information, the exact information. And it's the duty of every stakeholders to do it. The elected officials, the media has a role to play, the judges have a role to play. And that's why we've done at the Supreme Court for the last 7 years. I've been trying to provide enough information about the court's work, about our decisions, with the case in brief on one page to summarize what the decision means for the public, the annual review, my press conference every year, and bring the court outside of Ottawa, which we've done in Winnipeg, which we've done also in Quebec City, and as you know, we will sit in Halifax in 2027.
And I do have some more questions about sort of the efforts in particular to counter disinformation and misinformation. But when you, for example, say that you don't want to, you'll leave to the politicians to name certain culprits, I wanted to ask you why you're so hesitant in saying what you did, in outlining the threats to democracy. The rule of law is under attack. You said that means that there's a good chance that you are in front of a dictatorship, an autocratic government. Why are you so hesitant to name the culprit, particularly when, as you outline, Canadians are coming to you worried about something happening here that stems from there? Yeah,
I can go to some extent, but as a judge, I have a devoir de réserve, obligation of reserve. And it would be inappropriate for me to get into politics and discuss political issues. And it's not my job. It's the job of the elected officials, the government, who will represent us and will deal with the other countries in terms of political relations. But as a Chief Justice of Canada, I can talk about the level of confidence in the rule of law. I can talk about the situation of the justice system in Canada. I can talk about those issues, and it's not political. It's legal.
Respectfully, is it political, though, to ask about the situation as it exists in the United States? And again, I'll inform my question by the backdrop that you presented, that Canadians are genuinely very worried about a situation that has unfolded there. And let's put the person in charge aside for a second, just the justice system as it exists, the calling out by various people in power of judges, of the judicial system more largely, going out of their way to cast doubt on the integrity of it. Like, people are worried about that happening here as well. I know that you're saying that there are things in place to prevent that from happening, that we have reason to be optimistic, but don't we have to name what we're trying to counter? Don't we have to say, if in fact you're saying that all of those conditions lead to a dictatorship, that, something more exists?
Well, we know the reasons why we should be concerned. We don't need to name the countries. Everybody knows about the countries. There are many countries, not only the one you referred to, but others in the world. And they experience the same phenomenon of attacking the media, the traditional media, attacking the lawyers who don't act in the same interest as the governing people, attacking the judges, not only their decisions, but the judges themselves. Those ingredients are the same. And you will realize, and Canadians will realize that, in fact, when all those ingredients are melted together, we have a dictatorship. And we have to be careful and to work against that. And that's part of the legal system.
Final question for you. In the effort to work against that, a lot of the support for political actors around the world that engage in campaigns like the one that you just described is driven by misinformation and disinformation, and you talked about that. Your remarks earlier were all about sort of all the parties together working to counter that, so the media, the government, the courts. But we have seen efforts in this country to sort of formalize it, to put it into legislation, that have ultimately backfired largely over the impression that has been left that freedom of expression is being sort of trampled or contravened in some way. How difficult a balancing act is that? And do you ultimately think there is the potential for success?
It will always remain a sensitive issue. It's a work in progress in a way. And insofar as the courts are concerned, we have a limited jurisdiction. But we have to do our work. And the best thing to do is to provide the right information and facilitate access to justice. And that will help to improve the confidence of the public in the institutions and the courts in particular.
So it's more about, in your view, providing accurate information than it is forbidding the expression of things that are known to be untrue?
Well, I think it's to make sure that there's no misinformation in the public, and the best way to counterattack misinformation is to provide the right information, and so everybody has a role to play in that sense.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Chief Justice Wagner, I appreciate your time today as always. Thank you so much.
Nice being here. Thank you.